There is a conversation happening in every nature documentary, every wildlife ranking, every list of Africa's most dangerous animals, and the Nile monitor is not in it. You know who's in it. The lion gets the opening credits. The elephant gets the conservation episode. The crocodile gets the dramatic music and the slow-motion death roll. Even the hippo, which looks like a water barrel someone glued legs onto, has a better publicist than the Nile monitor. And what I want to know, specifically, is why. Because when you actually sit down and go through what a Nile monitor is, what it does, how it does it, and how long it has been doing it without anyone adjusting the conversation accordingly, you start to realize the omission isn't accidental. The Savannah just collectively decided not to make this animal more famous than it already is among the things that have to share a continent with it. And if you knew what it was capable of, you'd understand why that was probably the right call. The Nile monitor is a large lizard. That sentence is doing a lot of work that I need to unpack because large lizard does not prepare you for what we're actually talking about. Large lizard makes you think of something that sits on a rock and flicks its tongue at flies. The Nile monitor is up to 7 feet long, weighs up to 35 pounds, moves on land at speeds up to 20 miles per hour, swims faster than most people can sprint, climbs trees with a grip strength that leaves marks in bark, digs through compacted earth with claws engineered for exactly that purpose, and has been documented eating virtually everything that has the misfortune of being smaller than it or slower than it, or in the wrong place relative to it. It is not a large lizard in the way a golden retriever is a large dog. It is a large lizard in the way a crocodile is a large lizard, which is to say the size is the least interesting or alarming thing about it. The Nile monitor belongs to the genus Varanid, which is the same genus that produced the Komodo dragon, and that family connection tells you something important about the operational philosophy of the animal. Varanids are built differently from other lizards in ways that go beyond size. Most lizards are ectothermic in a way that limits their activity. Cold means slow, heat means fast, and their hunting window is defined by temperature. Varanids have a cardiovascular system that more closely resembles a mammal or a bird than a typical reptile. They have a partially divided heart that separates oxygenated and deoxygenated blood more efficiently than most reptiles, which means they can sustain aerobic activity for longer, recover from exertion faster, and stay active across a wider range of temperatures. The Nile monitor is a reptile that has quietly solved one of the main problems with being a reptile. This matters because it changes the threat calculus entirely. An animal that can only move fast in short bursts and needs to recover is manageable. You can wait it out. You can back away slowly. The Nile monitor does not need to wait for the temperature to cooperate. It can pursue. It can sustain. It can follow you into water, up a tree, and across open ground, and arrive at the end of all three options still capable of the thing it was trying to do when it started. The diet of the Nile monitor is the part of this conversation that most people aren't prepared for because it's not a diet so much as a policy of consumption that covers the widest possible range of available caloric content with the least possible dietary preference or restriction. Nile monitors eat fish, frogs, lizards, snakes, birds, small mammals, eggs, insects, carrion, and crocodile eggs. That last one deserves its own sentence. The Nile monitor eats crocodile eggs. The Nile crocodile is a top-tier apex predator that has been controlling access to African waterways for 200 million years and which we have already established runs a surveillance-based territorial operation that reshapes the behavior of every animal in its vicinity. And the Nile monitor has decided that the nest where the crocodile deposits the next generation of that operation is a food source. Crocodile mothers guard their nests with the full intensity that you would expect from an animal of that description guarding something that important. And the Nile monitor raids them anyway. Not occasionally. Regularly. It is a documented, consistent behavior. The monitor will wait for a moment of distraction, exploit a gap in the mother's attention, and excavate a crocodile nest with a speed and efficiency that reflects an animal that has been doing this long enough to have refined the technique. There is no entry in the Nile monitor's behavioral profile that says this might not work. It just does it because it has assessed the risk, determined the reward justifies the operation, and committed. The crocodile, for its part, has not solved this problem in 200 million years of trying, which tells you everything about the monitor's operational competence at this specific task. The claws are worth discussing separately because they are not incidental to the Nile monitor's success. They are load-bearing infrastructure for three completely different applications that most animals have to specialize their entire body plan around achieving one of. The same claws the Nile monitor uses to dig through compacted riverbank soil to access buried crocodile eggs are also the claws it uses to grip the vertical surface of a tree while climbing to raid a bird's nest 40 feet off the ground, and also the claws it uses to grip prey during a feeding event. One tool, three professional applications, each executed at a level of competence that would be impressive in an animal that did only one of them. The climbing is particularly worth addressing because it is the element of the Nile monitor's capabilities that most dramatically expands the radius of its threat. An animal that can pursue you into water is a problem. An animal that can pursue you into water and follow you up a tree afterward is a different category of problem. Nothing in the savannah gets to feel untouchable from a Nile monitor on the basis of altitude. The bird nesting in the acacia, the small mammal sheltering in the fork of a tree, the gecko on the vertical surface of a termite mound. All of them are operating within the Nile monitor's vertical range, and all of them know it in the way that prey animals know things, which is through the accumulated fear response of many generations of ancestors who learned the hard way. The venom situation is something that took the scientific community an embarrassingly long time to resolve, and the resolution, when it came, was not reassuring. For most of the history of monitor lizard research, the official position was that Varanid bites caused infection through bacteria rather than through any chemical mechanism. The idea being that the monitor's mouth was full of dangerous bacteria from feeding on carrion, and that the bacteria were responsible for the wound's failure to heal. This was wrong. Research published in 2009 demonstrated that Varanid lizards, including the Nile monitor, have venom glands in their lower jaw that produce a cocktail of compounds including anticoagulants, substances that prevent blood from clotting, along with compounds that drop blood pressure and cause tissue to swell. The Nile monitor bites you, and then your blood doesn't stop. The wound doesn't close. The tissue around the bite starts to fail. And the monitor, having delivered this, simply waits. It doesn't need to wrestle prey to the ground and hold it through a long suffocation. It bites, releases, and gives the biochemistry time to do the secondary work while it maintains a patient presence in the vicinity. This is not a hunting strategy that requires sustained physical effort. This is a hunting strategy that requires a functional venom delivery system and the patience to let it operate, both of which the Nile monitor has in abundance. The reason this took so long to establish scientifically is that the bacteria explanation was convenient and the monitor's bite was survivable enough in most recorded cases that the mechanism didn't feel urgent to resolve. But convenient and correct are different things, and what the corrected version tells you is that the Nile monitor is running a chemical operation on top of the physical one, which means the threat profile you were working with before you read this paragraph was incomplete. The intelligence is the part that makes all of the above more concerning rather than simply impressive in a detached way. Nile monitors have been studied in captivity and in the field extensively enough that a picture of their cognitive capabilities has emerged that does not fit comfortably into the category of instinct-driven reptile behavior. They demonstrate problem-solving in controlled environments, navigating multi-step obstacle courses to access food, remembering solutions across sessions, distinguishing between individual humans, and adjusting their behavior based on whether the person approaching them has fed them before or handled them in a way they found aversive. They learn from experience. They update their behavior based on outcomes. In the wild, this translates into a foraging strategy that operates more like a planned itinerary than a random search. Nile monitors have home ranges they patrol systematically, with documented evidence of them returning to productive sites at appropriate intervals, not randomly, but on a schedule that reflects awareness of when resources will be available again. A monitor that raided a bird colony's nesting area will return when the next clutch cycle produces eggs. A monitor that located a crocodile nest in a specific location will factor that location into its patrol route during nesting season. This is not sophisticated in the way primate cognition is sophisticated, but it is directional, and it is applied, and it means the Nile monitor is not just reacting to its environment. It is managing a resource portfolio. The relationship between the Nile monitor and human settlements is a whole separate conversation that could fill its own video, and is currently filling the ecological management files of several countries that were not prepared for what happens when you put a highly adaptable 7-foot lizard in proximity to the caloric density of a human community. Nile monitors have moved into urban and semi-urban environments across their range with a smoothness that reflects an animal whose skill set happens to map perfectly onto the opportunities those environments provide. Garbage attracts rodents. Rodents attract monitors. Chicken coops contain eggs and small birds. Monitors are aware of this. Irrigation systems create the water access monitors require. Monitors follow the water. In parts of Egypt, Sudan, and East Africa, Nile monitors are a consistent presence in villages, markets, and agricultural areas, and the relationship is not one of cautious coexistence. Monitors that access chicken coops do not take one egg and leave. They commit fully to the available resource until it's gone or they're removed. Monitors that are removed from a location and relocated have been documented returning, which tells you that the mental map the monitor maintains of its environment is detailed enough to navigate back to a productive site from a displacement distance that should, in theory, have disorientated an animal operating on pure instinct. It didn't disorientate the monitor because the monitor was not operating on pure instinct. The tail is something that deserves mention before we close this out, because it is both a weapon and a tool, and the fact that most coverage of the Nile monitor doesn't spend time on it is another entry in the long list of ways this animal is systematically underreported. The tail is as long as the rest of the body. It is heavily muscled, and when a Nile monitor feels threatened or cornered, it will use that tail as a whip with enough force to break the skin of a human arm or leave a welt across an exposed leg that takes days to fade. This is not the passive defensive response of an animal that's scared. This is a targeted percussive strike delivered by an animal that has clocked your location, assessed your proximity, and decided that the tail is the appropriate tool for this specific interaction. Combined with the claws, the venom-assisted bite, the speed on land and in water, the climbing capability, and the cognitive capacity to remember you specifically and update its threat response based on your past behavior. The tail is the detail that closes the argument. There is no environment in which a Nile monitor is cornered and helpless. There is only an environment in which it has not yet decided which of its available options is most appropriate for the situation. The reason the Savannah doesn't talk about the Nile monitor the way it talks about lions and crocodiles and elephants is partly cultural. Those animals have had centuries of human mythology, colonial hunting literature, and Hollywood production budgets invested in their reputations. But it's also partly functional. The lion hunts dramatically in open ground at scale. The crocodile takes prey at the waterhole in one catastrophic moment. These are events that produce narratives. The Nile monitor works differently. It excavates. It climbs. It waits. It applies biochemistry and patience and a systematic mental map of available resources to a foraging operation that is thorough, consistent, and almost entirely invisible to anything that isn't directly affected by it. The crocodile loses its eggs. The bird loses its clutch. The chicken coop is empty in the morning. And somewhere between the river and the acacia tree and the edge of the village, moving through all three environments with the same fluid competence, the Nile monitor has already moved on to the next item on the itinerary. That's not the behavior of an animal that needs a reputation. That's the behavior of an animal that doesn't care whether you know its name. It's going to do exactly what it's been doing since before the Savannah arranged itself into the landscape you recognize today, and your awareness of it changes nothing about the operation. The Savannah knows what it is. The Savannah just doesn't bring it up. Drink water. Hug your mother. If you're in East Africa and a 7-foot lizard is systematically removing your chickens, that's a Nile monitor, and it will be back. See you in the next one.